Welcome, everybody. I am not Brian Steed from the Department of Natural Resources. I am Candice Hasenyager. I'm the Division Director at the Division Water Resources. So welcome all. Thank you so much for being here. And we are just really excited to kick off the first Utah Watersheds Council meeting. That's just excited to be here. And a quick thank you to all the work that's gone into this. The Watershed Council project team that includes Dan Adams and Allison. And now I'm going to miss people because I've started naming people, but Peter Gessel, Nathan Bracken, and more. Dan, you can add the ones I've missed. And a big thank you to Carmen McDonald, who's doing our AV behind the screen. So we really appreciate her. Thank you. And Todd, you had a few remarks too.
Yeah, if you're done.
Yeah. Just had a few things that I wanted to mention. My name is Todd Stonley. I'm the Assistant Director at the Division of Water Resources, and I'm the project lead for the Watershed Council implementation. And I want you all to know that you are the captain of this ship, and the Division of Water Resources is here to support your efforts, but not direct them. So you're welcome to take that ship and sail off into the sunset on Great Salt Lake if you'd like to, or get in a wooden boat and go down the perils of the Colorado River like John Wesley Powell did. It's up to you. But we're here to support you in whatever you decide. Wanted to let you know that here at the division we have area planning specialists for each of the planning areas. So when the local watershed councils are set up, we'll have support through our area planning specialists, and they will be engaged with those councils. We have an administrative assistant. She's back here behind the rostrum. That's Shannon Clough. And we have all these people listed. Not the area planning specialist, but Shannon's on the list. And she'll be helping us with travel reimbursements and so forth, and posting minutes, and so coordinating the administration of this council. So she'll be there to support you as well. As I noted in the email I sent previously, you are eligible for per diem and travel reimbursement. So if you want any of that done, I didn't get any responses by email, but we have some forms here for you if you want to take advantage of that in the future. I can hand those to you, and you can get them back to us, or for today's meeting as well. And one last thing, if you'd please state your name when speaking, that will help Shannon. The first couple times you say something, if you'd state your name, then she'll know who you are, and that will help as she transcribes the minutes later. And that's all I had. Thank you for being here.
Okay, I'll try this out. Okay, well, I think I know most of you. My name is Dan Adams. I'll take this off from up here. I'll run through our agenda real quick and kind of talk about a couple other things for our meeting today. And since this is your meeting, and it's our first kickoff meeting, if you have anything you guys want to add or don't want to do, let me know. I do want to let everybody know that this is being recorded. And so if it's just important to know, if you want to know you are being recorded. And if anybody has any questions or concerns about that, let me know too. So the agenda you all have in front of you there, one of the things we want to do here in a second is go through and do kind of an expanded introduction. So how many of you know everybody at this table? Does anybody not know everybody? No? Okay. No? Okay. So I think this will be important because one of your homework assignments after today will be to think about who you would like to be the chair and the co-chair for our upcoming council. So our next council meeting that'll be one of the things on our agenda is to work through that. So this is kind of a chance for you to all get to know each other a little bit. So when we do introductions, my thought is to say who you are and the organization you work with, but also to let us know what are the things that that you feel like watershed councils can do or you're hoping they will be able to do, because we want this to be a valuable experience for you. And then go ahead and take a minute to do that. So we're asking everybody to take about 3 minutes to introduce themselves. We know some of you would maybe take 30 seconds. Some of you might want to go longer, but we're just going to shoot for a 3-minute window there. Then we have Warren Peterson with us today. He's calling in from Delta and is going to go through and kind of talk about the history of the Act. What are those things that led to its creation and brought us to being here today? And so that's going to be great to have Warren walk through and help us with that, help give a context. Then Candice is going to give a kind of a state of water in the state of Utah. And so we'll have opportunity. We're going to want to get your thoughts about that from what you see from your positions as well. But Candice is kind of help us all be on that same page. Then we'll take a break, and then we're going to go through, and Peter and I are going to walk through kind of creating the governing policies or our organizational documents. And we won't make any decisions on that today, but we'll at least review. We have a draft for you to all look at, and you can all decide what things you want or you want to change in that. So. Then we're going to go through. Probably one of the biggest things today is to adopt the electronic meeting resolution so that in the future people can participate virtually. We did have a few people want to participate virtually, but until we get that done, we can't do that. So that's one of our big things today. And for those of you in the audience, that will be the one thing that we'll stop and open up for public comment before we take that vote. And then our last thing is going to be what would you like watersheds to accomplish, the Watershed Council to accomplish this year? And so we'll spend some time on that, and then we'll talk about our next meeting, and then we'll wrap up there. So does that sound good? Any other things you're hoping to get out of this meeting or not today? Okay. So why don't we go ahead and I'm going to actually let Peter also give his introduction, because he's played a long historical role in this as well, tied to drafting of the Act. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Peter, your name, where you work, and what you're hoping to get out of watershed.
If you want to start further back, we got Methuselah of the Watershed Council Act up there in the upper left-hand corner. Maybe he should start.
He's going to get plenty of time.
Yeah, so will I. Peter Gessel, an attorney at Smith Hartfigson. We're participating as a policy council with Langdon Group in this project, working for Dan. Prior to my coming on at Smith Hartfigson about 5 months ago, I was working doing water policy with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and it was while I was there that I was tapped to engage as the person behind the keyboard writing the Watershed Council Act. So it's been a long ride, and I did not expect to be sitting here today in this role at this point, but it's exciting to see these things come to fruition. So,
Peter, maybe give one or two thoughts about what do you think are the potential with watershed councils and what can be done here?
And prior to even the policy work, I was working over in water quality with someone else here. I don't remember her name at the moment, but point being, having worked as a state regulator and worked in these different roles in the water world, one of the most there's those disconnects, right, between agencies, and then sometimes too often between the agencies and the people that they're responsible for serving, regulating, whatever. And just the thought, which really I think was really put into writing and conceptually brought together in the state water strategy in 2017 that Warren will be addressing. The idea that maybe, why don't we form something more lasting, more permanent, and have that come from the grassroots, ground up in these areas that we're trying to regulate, that we're trying to work with, to get those on the ground informed, build those relationships between each other, and give these state agencies, these regulators, those in those positions, the opportunity to get to know those folks and to hear from their perspective before the big projects come in, before this or that regulation is dropped. Hear their perspectives, build those relationships, and hear what's important to them. So what I hope for is to see this really mature to the point where we do have local councils with local water users and different sectors there showing up and talking together, whether they're officially sitting there on the council or not, that they get together and build those relationships and understand where each other are coming from. And then to have the state agencies, a number of which are represented here, and to have the folks that are here, number one, hear from those local groups, both here and then as they go out from their agencies, have the agencies talking to each other. Hopefully this will help that. There have been a number of initiatives to improve that. But then to have them be able to hear from those folks beforehand and then be more prepared and to have those relationships when they go out.
That works.
It can be said more elegantly, but that's
All right, Ricky.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ricky.
That not on? There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ricky Ranko Browning. I'm the president of the Utah Petroleum Association. We represent upstream, midstream, downstream oil and gas interests in the state of Utah. In my seat here today in this board, I'm representing industrial interests. The nominating entities associated with that are obviously petroleum, but also mining and manufacturing here in the state of Utah. So that's kind of the focus that I bring to this group. And in terms of what I think would be interesting for us to achieve and what's really motivating to me is, you mentioned the regulatory component, and obviously that's front of mind for industrial users, and we recognize that we play a very significant role in this puzzle of how we're going to responsibly manage the state's water resources and the challenge associated with that. Regulatory is front of mind. But I think we also have a lot of large water users that want to find opportunities to collaborate on projects and to understand how they can play a more proactive role in being better stewards of that very limited resource. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to have a better understanding of what those opportunities might be and have a seat at the table and bringing some of those things to fruition. I think from an industrial and an agricultural perspective, those two seats have a big role to play in terms of how we can more effectively manage our state's water resources. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Chris?
Thank you. Yeah. My name is Chris Hamlett. I'm the director of the Utah Division of Emergency Management under the Department of Public Safety. And this was kind of of interest to us in many ways. In our office, we focus on mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And there's just a lot of elements of watersheds that we talk about directly or indirectly and how they're impacted. And for us, it's probably right now a great time for us to meet with this group and collaborate because we have the ability to reach into some new programs and pots of funding for mitigation efforts that are larger than we've ever seen from the federal government. And so FEMA's got some great opportunities for us there to maybe look into investing in our infrastructure and the way that we deal with watersheds and other infrastructure throughout our state. But also in dealing with hazards and natural disasters, especially drought, wildfire, debris flows, other types of hazards like that. We're always interested in what the impacts are on the the watersheds before and after these events occur. And in our office, we also are in charge of the state floodplain mapping. So we do a lot with floodplain management and have a lot of interest in the waterways and what they're looking like statewide. So for me, I think this is an opportunity to learn a lot from some of these other groups that we don't normally get to work with. Some of them we do. I see Kim all the time lately, and I think DNR we've been closely working with for quite a while with the drought issues. And I think this is an opportunity to work with some other groups and talk about how we can work, more closely together on some of these issues.
Very good. Thanks. Thank you. Candice, anything you want to add?
Sure. Candice Hasenyager, director at the Division of Water Resources, and I've been at Water Resources for almost 15 years, and I grew up at Water Resources in my career, so to say, and um, I've just been really grateful for the opportunities to work on some of the projects I've got to work on and the people that I ended up working with. And there are many faces that are very familiar around this table that I've got to interact with. And I think as we go forward and some of the challenges that we're looking at ahead, I think this collaboration is key to what we're going to be able to address those challenges and work towards solutions in the future. So just really excited to participate.
I think that part about I think this is, I've had multiple conversations the last 2 days about this. That part about we all have fires in front of us right in our jobs, all these things we have to do. I do think that the part about having a statewide watershed council really is kind of a unique opportunity to think ahead, to look ahead and have that moment to pause and look big picture. In the kind of research we've done on this as we've started this, we've met with multiple states and looked at other states, what they're doing around watershed councils. And we don't know of another state that has a statewide watershed council. So that there's really successful local watershed councils in other states and lots we can learn from that. But this is kind of a very unique thing to meet today and to kick this off with a statewide watershed council. So the other thing I want to add real quick to that is just to make sure everybody knows that this group will expand by at least 12 once we get the 12 local watershed councils up and running. And so, yeah, be thinking about that. And I think that idea, and Warren's going to talk about this a little bit, but that by having the local and the state, it's a great opportunity for all those local things that are going on all over the state to roll up into one forum and to also roll back to give information out. So that part about funding and those opportunities you're talking about, Chris, that's, I think, can be a great example of what can be done here. So, all right, I'll quit. Marcel.
Thank you. Can you hear me? All right.
Yep.
Okay. Great. I'm Marcel Schupp. I'm the director of the Saline Lakes Program for National Audubon Society, which is actually part of Audubon's Western Water Initiative. And I'm here to represent the environmental and conservation interests for the state. And that appointment was from the governor, but based on recommendations from head of Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Natural Resources. Super pleased to be here and hope I can do a good job representing all these other environmental and conservation interests. There are a number of organizations and people that have a lot of interest in the natural environment and how well it functions. And I think this group, one of the things that it can do, particularly on the education and learning front, is start bringing in some of the new thinking around watershed management, particularly natural infrastructure, the ability to store more water in the watershed, not necessarily using hardscape, and other innovative ideas, as well as bringing in, we have the opportunity to bring in federal liaisons, and given, the amount of federal lands that are managed by some of those agencies, I think that importance of ensuring that we've got cross communication and looking for innovative ideas could be really beneficial. So that would be one of the things that I would hope this group could focus on as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Scott Paxman. I work with Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, representing, though, as a supplier, water supplier, and a sponsor of a large reclamation project, the Weber Basin Project. We operate and maintain 7 large reservoirs and dams on the Weber and Ogden rivers, and we've had some sort of watershed council since I started work at the district 30 years ago, and it's been it's kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but we've been very successful in just providing a coordination with all the activities that are going on in a watershed, whether it's petroleum lines being installed or work on the river or one of the dams or a new diversion or whatever it might be, so that everyone is aware of what's going on and can provide some input. And so I think this is just an awesome ability to provide a platform for that coordination on all the watersheds throughout the state. So I think it's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm on the executive board for the Utah Association of Special Districts, and then I work for the Washington County Water Conservancy District as an associate general manager. I work for new project development, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of like an ordinary day in our life because we work with industry and we work with floods, and we've worked with FEMA and water resources and natural resources and water rights and all of our state agencies and reclamation and just everything. And so I guess I don't know what to expect or where this will go, but I think it's a good thing. We work with endangered species and conservation groups all the time. I've been with the Water Conservancy District for 17 years. When I was hired, I was actually hired as a watershed manager. And prior to being in Utah, even though I'm originally from here, I worked for the state of Pennsylvania for 10 years as a watershed manager, and I coordinated activities in the north central part of the state for a sixth of the state. And there we had activities, and we had regional and statewide watershed managers and then local watershed groups that we worked with. And I worked with the local groups where the rubber meets the road and worked on watershed improvements, water quality projects, mine reclamation, non-point source reductions, all kinds of stuff like that. And so, this isn't a new thing, but it's a tried and proven approach that can have some good results. And anyway, so I'm glad to be here and glad to be a part of this.
I like that you kind of, there's also this unknown part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I put together the agenda with the team and everything. You want it to just be perfect, meeting where everybody walks like, this is the greatest thing ever. But part of this is, since this really hasn't been done before with the statewide council, there should be some parts that are like, I'm not sure about that. That's
Sure.
That's going to be natural to fill that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that's kind of the fun part, just kind of figure that out and decide what you want this to be, for this council. That's kind of unique and fun. So I'm going to put a question like that because we don't know.
Sure.
Mark?
Yeah, my name is Mark Stratford. I'm a Deputy City Attorney for Ogden City, and in that role I have the chance to work a lot with the League of Cities and Towns on water issues. Prior to working for Ogden City, I worked for the Attorney General's office doing work in general water rights adjudications throughout the state. And now I'm able to represent the League of Cities and Towns also on the Utah Water Task Force. And so when I look at the opportunity of this body, I see really a number of things, and primarily, I guess the opportunity to provide, I don't know if I'd say direction, but support to the local watershed councils as they are created and as they start to figure out what they're going to do. Because honestly, they're not all going to do the same thing, right? They're all going to be focused on different interests. And so I see us as how do we provide the maximum support so that the local watershed councils can be productive in what they need to accomplish at their level, because we're not going to tell them what to do, but we want to be a resource. The other thing I really see here is the opportunity, I don't know if you call it breaking down silos, but when you look at the whole watershed, I think all of us in our individual jobs, we know how we interact with water. We know what we do in relation to water, and I'm pretty sure we all think what we do is, I don't know if it's the most important, but it's pretty darn important. But we don't always, so in that siloed world, we don't always appreciate sometimes the concerns that other people who interact with the watershed have, and the opportunity to create that network. A few days ago, I was reading something that really disturbed me about another state and some concerns that certain water interest holders had, and about how water was being managed, and it created I think there was a lack of interaction between water users there, and it led to conspiracy type theories that maybe there was some bigger power at work trying to deny them of their rights in order to serve some hidden purpose. And I think when people don't know who else is involved and they don't have opportunities to interact with them, it breeds that kind of distrust. And the more that we can know each other, we're not going to always agree with each other, right? Users are going to have conflicts, but the more that we know each other and know we can talk to each other, the more that we can make mutually beneficial decisions that everybody can understand, and then make the best of the difficult situation. So kind of this idea of accurate and trustworthy information. Yeah, I like that idea of avoiding conspiracy theories or inaccurate information, right? That's a great opportunity by this having a chance to work with, like you said, local and at a statewide level. Hopefully we are able to do that well. Yeah, that'll be great. Okay, Kim?
Thank you. So I'm one of the people that will speak for 30 seconds. So really short and sweet, and then I'll hand it off to the commissioner. Kim Shelley. I'm the executive director of the Department of Environmental Quality. Been in this role for about a year, but I've been with the department for nearly 20. And like Candice, I grew up through the Division of Water Quality, so water is near and dear to my heart. So as many of you know, the department, one of our mandates is to protect and preserve the waters of the state, which include groundwater and our surface water as well. And we accomplished that through the Clean Water Act and the Utah Water Act, Utah Water Quality Act. And so one of my, I guess, goals for this group would be to something that Scott and Mark have already touched on, is to integrate those existing, really highly functioning work groups, and to make sure that we don't lose any momentum that they've built on with this group. I know, like Jordan River Commission, Utah Lake Commission, they've been highly successful, and we really want to make sure that we can support them and build on that and successfully integrate their efforts into this larger statewide effort. But I'm really looking forward to what this group can accomplish, and I'm happy to be part of it. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. That part about there is so much good work that is being done and has been done. There's so much good stuff to build off of. I'm glad you brought that up. Right on.
Okay.
Craig?
Thanks, Dan. Craig Butters, Commissioner of Agriculture and Food for the state here. I came on with Kim the same time, but I've only been with the department for that year. So prior to that, I served in local office in county, Cache County as the county executive, and I've had other experience as a legislator and as a county council member up in Cache Valley. My background is in the dairy industry, and I'm an irrigator, property owner, and so I've got a lot of interest in that. Of course, in this role, as you all know, ag is responsible for the use of about 80% of the diverted water here in the state, and so I think it's very important that our agricultural producers are represented well, and that the correct information goes to the public. I think the public perception of agriculture and the irrigation at this time is good, but there are questions that are being brought up as we deal with drought issues that need to have messages, the correct message sent to our public, so that they truly understand what role agriculture and agricultural irrigation play in their lives. So that's what I would like to see is some advocacy here in this group for agriculture and ag water use.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. Allison, you want to say who you are? And
My name is Allison Adams. I work with the Langdon Group and have been helping organize this group. I've been the one pestering you with all the emails. So I will continue to be a resource for you as we carry on.
And to dispel any, to get accurate, correct information out, since we talked about Allison is my niece. So, so if you talk, and we're not related to Todd Adams, either of us, and we want to clarify that right up front. Okay. Well, all right. Let's go ahead and actually let me take one quick second. A thought back in my mind is, just so everybody knows, we have this little consultant team that's been helping with this. It's kind of been mentioned, Candice said at the beginning. One of the things that how we started off this effort was to try to have understanding about people's thoughts and ideas around watershed councils. So starting my first visit with folks was January 28th of this last year. And in doing that, I've been able to meet with about 350 people around the state to kind of get their thoughts and ideas. And that has been fantastic. And so I just want you to know there's been a lot of dialogue, and I met with a lot of you in here as well. But this next part about the local watershed councils, there's a lot of great energy there. People have been super positive. And so that's going to be an exciting part as we bring all those other thoughts and ideas, and these lists get expanded. It's going to be fun. So, okay, Warren, we'll turn the time over to you. Oh, Candice, yeah. Oh yeah, Dustin.
And just giving him an excuse for being late. I kept him late on a meeting, and he had to commute here. So thanks, Dustin.
Yeah, I apologize. I was driving as fast as I could legally. in my minivan, my Speedwagon.
Dustin, what we just did is we just went around and people said who they are, where do they work, what do they do, and then maybe take a minute if you have any thoughts about what do you see as the potential we can do with watershed councils, if there's any of your ideas on that. So everybody's been taking about 3 minutes there.
Okay, Dustin Jansen. I've been in the director for the Utah Division of Indian Affairs since February 2020. I'm originally from New Mexico. I'm Navajo. I grew up on the reservation there, but I've lived in Utah quite a bit in my adult life. By trade, I'm an attorney. I was a judge for a long time, and I feel like, with at least with our office and what we do is we try to facilitate good working relationships between governmental entities, and I think this is an example of how that can be used and to better the relationship between the state and tribes, but also to just make a healthier Utah. I think, especially now with Governor Cox, I think he understands that a healthy Native community creates a healthier state, and so I think with something like this, something that's so integral to human life, we can use this platform as a way to make things better overall.
Very good. Thank you. And welcome. We're glad you're here. Okay, Peter.
Dan, if I may, if you're talking about what brought us here in the creation of the act, I think we had someone else slip in who was integral. The back of the room. This was initialized in 2 tracks, one through the Legislative Water Development Commission, the other through the Utah Task Force, and I believe it was Warren Peterson who asked Todd Adams, is that correct, Warren, to be one of the co-chairs, and I'd hate to see Todd get through the meeting without having to brag about how integral he was to getting us here.
Without a chance to get even. I merely made the motion in the Water Task Force for Todd to be appointed as the chair, but the entire group voted for it, so I wanted more fingerprints on the knife than just mine.
Todd, is there anything you want to add? Thanks, Warren.
You're welcome.
All right. Maybe we'll pull Todd in for some of his thoughts later on. Okay, Warren, we'll go ahead and hand the ball to you. Oh, what?
Sorry, I apologize. I just
Yeah.
just a question. This is Marcel speaking.
Sure.
Would it be possible just for the people in the audience, because there's not that many, just to say their name and who they're with?
Sure.
That would be nice to know. I mean, I know some of them, but not everybody.
Yeah, you bet. That'd be great. And if I've gotten several notices that I need to speak into the mic better. So if everybody could speak in the mic, that'd be great.
Sure. Wendy Crowther. I'm with the Attorney General's office representing the Division of Water Resources.
I'm Giselle Terry. I'm with Jordan Valley Water.
I'm Brandon Nielsen with JUB Engineers, helping Dan on part of the project team. Dan Adams here.
I'm Ross Hansen. I am sitting in for Teresa Wilhelmsen today as the acting state engineer for the Division of Water Rights.
Hello, Stephanie McGinnis. I'm the Water Conservation Manager with Division of Water Resources.
Jordan Nielsen. I'm with Trout Unlimited.
Good afternoon, Soren Simonson, Executive Director of the Jordan River Commission.
Michael Sanchez, Public Information Officer, Utah Division of Water Resources.
Todd Adams, Deputy Director, Department of Natural Resources.
I'm Shannon Clow. I'm with the Water Division, or Water Resource Division, and I'm new, and I'm back here taking notes.
Since we're all kind of familiar with the acronyms and all this stuff, if you ever have something like, wait, hold on, raise your hand or wave and we'll grab you. Okay. All right. Okay, we're ready for Warren? Okay. Warren, it is officially your turn.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, I've had my screen queued up to share, and now it's saying I can't do it. Is my screen being shared?
It is not.
All right. Lovely. Let's see if we can get that working.
It was working well before.
Yes, it was. Unfortunately, I had to reboot. So let's see if we're working now. Now you're probably getting my whole screen instead of just the presentation screen.
Yeah, we've got you. Yeah, you're right. It is showing the. So if you start your slideshow.
It's already started, Dan. So,
Okay.
You know, this is
That screen would work, Warren. We can just have you go through your slides there that way.
Let's try one other thing. How are we doing now?
There we go. Looks good.
All right. Well, you know, these sort of team building experiences where we get to work through the technology, that's almost as difficult as working by remote like this with a room full of people whose bios are intimidating enough to give me stage shock or stage fright, even though I'm not on the stage. But thanks for accommodating my version of social distancing. So thank you, Peter Methuselah, huh? Oh. So let's go through this history. First of all, I like to use my own photography. This is what my backyard looks like in February in Oasis, so that's one reason I like to be here. And let's go to this. I hope you're seeing the Bagley cartoon of what an artist's conception of what the Watershed Council might look like. And this came from when we were working on the Governor Herbert's water strategy. Tage Flint, Tim Hawks, and I met with the Tribune editorial board one day, and I made the comment that I'd learned at a meeting, a water meeting in Dallas, actually, where the president of the National Cattlemen Beef Association said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And following that meeting with the editorial board, Bagley put out this cartoon the next day, and I think it tells the story in just wonderful detail. A lot of the interests we see around the table, we need to make sure are around the table. Dan, I'm calling you out, Dan, because to call this the State Watershed Council meeting, this is so much more. This is a historic event, and we've seen other historic events, but this council now is being charged by your appointment and by state law to organize watershed councils in the state. So, Mark, I was very glad to hear you volunteer and step up for that, because you do that well. So I hope everybody remembers that Mark volunteered to help on this effort. So what we have now, I'd liken it to, for those history buffs in the group, all of you know the story, the Articles of Incorporation or Articles of Confederation were weak, and something stronger needed to be done. And I submit that we're acting under sort of a Articles of Confederation approach now to water in Utah, instead of a strong united effort. So what you can do while you're here is help lay the foundations that we can act on Utah water needs rather than just being reactive. And we've got some excellent examples. Scott, you pointed out the one with the Weber River Watershed Council. Kim, your agency has certainly had some good history with this. So help us lay the foundations and build what needs to be built. So the history runs something like this. We've had all these watershed success stories. One of my favorites, just because it's close to home, is that when the general adjudication began on the Sevier River in 1916, the water users litigated the first couple of events of that and ran up attorney's fees. Now, this is being the early 20s by this time, of $350,000. The only room in the state big enough to accommodate the hearing was the House chambers at the Capitol. And the water users quickly realized that their litigation costs were going to enrich a lot of attorneys, but not many farmers. And so they resolved into watershed councils to design the Cox Decree. And you have that 236-page or so document that's a stipulation worked out by these watershed councils. There's been, let me back up a second there. Washington County Water Conservancy District, Corey, you know the story much better than I do, but Ron Thompson is just a force of nature putting these things together and making them work so that your projects can roll forward. It's a good example of how to work. The one that really kicked off this effort was Governor Herbert's Water Strategy Advisory Team that worked from 2013 through 2014. I'll use Ron's name again. I calculated one day that over 800 years of experience were together in that group, similar to the kind of experience this group has. And Tage Flint stepped up to the microphone and quipped and said, yes, half of that 800 years is Ron Thompson himself. So you all bring that kind of experience. Kim, your experience with the watershed councils with water quality will be very valuable. How do you make them meaningful? How do you set them up, keep them going? The state engineers water distribution committee, so I'm glad the Division of Water Rights is represented here today, because they've had great success in the various river systems with the distribution committees. And then there's these river committees or commissions, Weber River, Provo River. Those have all been very successful. If we look now, though, at how do we approach statewide water policy? We have the legislature, and you've heard legislators. I'll not cast any stones, but legislators say you can count on one hand how many people in the legislature really understand water. Well, and we in water understand. How many of us understand regulation of the insurance industry or taxation, those sort of things? So there's specializations, and one of the purposes of this water council, as we envisioned it, was to be an advisor to the legislature if they choose. We do have the Legislative Water Development Commission. They meet 4 times a year for about 2 to 3 hours at a crack, but that's not going to have the type of rolling up of issues from around the state. Board of Water Resources. I was on the board for 12 years, and I think I was there for 4 years before I finally learned that the board is by statute the state's water policy board. But that function has not been funded, and it's not been emphasized. we do have the Water Task Force that co-chaired by Commissioner Butters, by Executive Director Shelley and Executive Director Steed, and that's been very successful. In my opinion, I've been there since the inception of it, and it's written and helped implement over 100 pieces, 100 separate item legislative bills. So it's an example how a council, or a task force as it's called, with the power to recommend only, can actually have a great influence in helping the evolution of water and water policy and water law in the state. So these are some success stories that we've had, but also probably a description of the limitations, because you notice there's nothing there except the legislative groups that, how should I put it? The task force, the water resources, they have statewide reach, but there's no roll up from the local watershed councils and no sharing of resources back to local councils. So focusing on this particular, if you would, Water Policy Council, this, I'm trying to, what it was called, the Governor's Water Strategy Advisory Team. I've got the letter right here with me that Governor Herbert said it would take about maybe 4 meetings in a year to put this together. It took many meetings and 4 years, and we came out with this document with recommendations of, across the board. It was a marvelous experience with 41 people all across the political spectrum and all across the water economy, if you will, that came together and produced a consensus document. One of the consensus recommendations that appeared several times through the document was to establish watershed councils. And so what we're doing here today is a fruition of that recommendation. It's pretty exciting to see. So I asked one of the people that was highly involved in the process, R.A. Bruning, I says, what would you liken it to? And he says, well, liken it to the Transportation Commission. So look at it. They have local planning come up through all of the states under an MPO. And those local MPOs, I mean, for instance, Mountain Land Association of Governments, Wasatch Front Regional Council, and so on. They develop their local plans. The local plans are rolled up to the state level, and then it's adopted at the state level, and usually all the family feuds are worked out along the way. But then once it's reached that point, it's a coordinated plan that can be used and, frankly, lobbied for funding by all those participants. Now compare that to what we do in water. If water, you look at water, you almost have to follow the money. You've got Department of Natural Resources involved in water resources loans and grants, but the Division of Water Resources doing a lot of planning. Utah Department of Ag and Food, there again, I didn't show it here, but planning, but the irrigation cost share programs, DEQ, the Water Quality Board, the Drinking Water Board, both have loan and grant programs with the federal partnerships that go on there. I know from experience that we have funding policy from the Community Impact Board. Then there's all kinds of federal programs, but the thing to note here, all of this is siloed, except to the extent, and thank goodness, that executive directors and division directors and so on spend time communicating with each other to coordinate this, but there's no real central formal way to do it. This council would become that, would fulfill that function. So we didn't just go out and, put this thing together over a weekend. We kept Peter at that keyboard for a long time. The first thing we did is the Water Task Force put together a team and then allowed open membership. Anyone that wanted to participate can, and several of the people in the room here did. And we kicked ideas around for about 2 years. And then we went out and talked to others. I'm featuring here James Eklund, who ran this same process for the state of Colorado. Now we know Colorado's a horse of a different color. I mean, for instance, one reason I cut off this center photo of James is that the guy driving the truck here is Governor Hickenlooper. I don't think he'd get too far with the Utah legislature, and maybe that's a good thing. But look at what they said about Colorado's first comprehensive look was developing a state water plan, and they did it through regional roundtables that then rolled up to the state level, and that's where their state plan came from. But look at the things they had to deal with: protecting the state's water supply, threatened by regional politics, population growth, and climate change. Gee, different states, same problems. But James gave some very good advice on how to put this together, and then efforts were made to look at other states and how they did things. But it wound up being a 2-year process. It was vetted repeatedly to the water community, and believe me, the bill changed and morphed. Those that were on the drafting committee, Marcel, for instance, you'll remember how much we had to work and rework based on feedback from the water community. But in the end, with Tim Hawks, I really was grateful for Representative Hawks stayed with us and worked with us very closely through the whole process, including he sponsored in the legislature. Ralph Okerlund was the Senate sponsor. And the final passage votes after concurrence between the two chambers of the legislature was a unanimous vote. So it was off to an auspicious beginning. And so looking into the act itself, one of the comments about the act is that we didn't really spell things out all that carefully. Well, there's a reason we didn't. Mark, you've already touched on this, but we wanted especially the local watershed councils, to be able to essentially define their future. So the reason I'm referring to this is this group is kind of a constitutional convention, if you will, is that part of your job is to design how this watershed council is going to function, and also to foster the development of similar local charters, I'll call them that, with the regional watershed councils. So what are we doing here? This is the statutory instruction. This part will be liberally construed. That's in case somebody in the black robe someone in a black robe decides to tighten it down. This is one of the liberal construction clauses in the statute. The intention is to develop diverse and balanced stakeholder forums to discuss water policy and resources at the watershed and state levels. And I'll focus on this other language in the next slide, but one of the things to do is to use local expertise and the resources found in the university, other research institutions, and in governmental agencies at all levels of government. So this is a pretty ambitious assignment, isn't it? And you wonder, so what happens? What's our product? What are we trying to produce here? One of the things that was just insisted on by the water community as this was put together, they wanted to test drive this. They didn't want it to have to be another level of government they had to work through. And you can see that's not what it's intended to do. This is intended to be a coordination or entity, an opportunity. Several of you, as you spoke, used the word opportunity, which I think was great, because we're trying to develop that opportunity for communication, a lot of other things. But at the insistence of some of the public feedback, they wanted to make sure that this council was not vested with regulatory infrastructure, financing, or enforcement powers or responsibilities. And I think the vetting process did us a favor, because I think you could substitute the word vested with the word burdened. You're not burdened with all of these things. You can talk about what really counts. You can set policy. You can be forward-looking. Some of them must have read Alexander Hamilton when he said, "Too much power leads to despotism and too little leads to anarchy." I suspect as you foster development of some of the local councils, you may have to deal with a little anarchy. At least they can't accuse you of despotism. I'm sure that's going to help you sleep better tonight, Mark, isn't it? So asking, what are some of the potential benefits? You all listed several of them. This was a list that I reached out to some of those that were involved in the Water Strategy Advisory Team and collected their thoughts. I'm not going to read the whole list. This will be available to you later, but a couple of big ones here is the opportunity to get this group together for better conjunctive management or coordination, but to identify and resolve water conflicts so that they can be done face to face. We heard a very good discussion of that right at the outset of our meeting. If you, and several of you touched on this, if you can get together, it's no longer the person on the other side of the basin that we're fighting with. It's my friend that I've worked with in the Basin Council, and I trust them now enough that we can sit down and solve problems. But the resource sharing, but the list goes on. A big one is collaboration, Utah style. Anytime we talk, this came up in the conversations with James Eklund. In Utah, you just have this way of sitting down together and working things out, and it's a great thing. But the real key to this is going to be the collaboration and the single coordinated architecture, building the architecture for local involvement, but a statewide roll-up of issues, so that the differences in water between Cache Valley and San Juan County can be, they each have a forum. And there's a way for, basically, you can deputize each other to help carry the message. Great opportunity. So the outcome should be, I hope, a greater acumen or astuteness about water, which is defined. It's the ability to make good judgments, decisions, typically in a particular domain like water. Now, I put this slide in to focus on a phenomenon that we're hearing. I think all of you have run into this in your work in the water community. I was trying to describe it one day to my daughter, who is she's well-educated, PhD in biological chemistry and nanotechnology. Right now she's working as a teacher. I said, what would you call this? And she said, well, I'd call it the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Okay, so I looked it up. A cognitive bias in which people wrongly overestimate their knowledge or ability in a specific area. And it can be described as we don't even know what we don't know. We see that a lot in water. We see it every day in water. So that's why experts like you coming together with this sort of thing, with this sort of opportunity, can provide some guidance that, frankly, the state at large doesn't have. I sure feel like I'm preaching to the choir. So let's talk about the local councils. There's the 12 of them, the 11 watershed councils shown in this map, depicted in this map. And then one specific to the Great Salt Lake that takes in as membership the River, Weber River, Jordan River, Utah Lake, and West Desert local councils. But they will be organized locally with local rules, but you, as the State Watersheds Committee, will need to certify that they've hit the target. What's the target? Is to have balanced stakeholder engagement and sufficient rules of operation to comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act and these sorts of things. And then each of those local ones do send a representative to the state council, so your state council will enlarge as your work goes forward. And that's all detailed in, Peter, I expect you'll give us a full and complete description of this shortly. One of my favorite comments, and from a good friend that I respect dearly, he says, you have to guarantee that some of you around the table will smile because you probably know who I'm talking about, but good man. He said, I just want to make sure this is not just another damn meeting. Is this worthwhile, or is it, you have to promise me that it's going to be worthwhile, or is it just another damn meeting? And knowing that he's, a gentleman, I assumed he was spelling damn with 3 letters. So I thought about what comes out of damn meetings. Well, this one came out of some of those damn meetings. Of course, we've learned a lot since Hoover Dam was built. Can we do a better job based on the learning and experience in this room? Yes. And then you have to ask the question, what if we don't move forward? The legislature's got us on a fairly short fuse. They're going to review in 2024 whether this effort was worthwhile or not, and whether to continue it. But there's a mandate for those who are familiar with Envision Utah and what they do, and so I know that maybe all of you in this room have worked with Envision Utah in one way or another. Ari Bruning was kind enough to share this slide with me. He said, this is not for the press yet because they want to do their own press release. So this is brand new, hot off their press. They've rebuilt the Utah Values Study that was done in 2014. And you'll probably recall that in 2014, water was ranked as the highest issue by the public. With a mean score, a scale of 1 to 10 of 6.4, it was the highest ranked. Well, it's highest ranked again this year with 6.5 ranking. Those of you that sat through were able to participate in the in Speaker Wilson's Great Salt Lake meeting yesterday, heard him say that in what did he say? That in the last year he's heard probably 5 times as much discussion of water issues as he's heard in the last 10 years put together. I think, if I remember correctly, that's what he said. So there's a very strong mandate, very strong interest, and certainly, you all know, a very strong need. Can it work? Well, I have to admit, Dan and I, we kicked around whether to put this slide in, but it's here just for fun. I have a daughter, not a daughter, a younger sister who lives in Helsinki. She's quite the citizen of the world. She teaches linguistics in Helsinki and travels Europe extensively, fluent, functional at least in nearly all of the European languages. And she landed in Spain last year and ran across these 2 things, and she had to send me pictures: the Valencia Water Court and the Council of Wise Men of the Plain of Marsella. What's cool about these 2 organizations is they're the oldest ongoing democratic institutions in the world. And what are they? They're both water councils. And they've been in business, particularly the Valencia Water Court has been in business for 1,000 years. So we're hoping that with the work you'll do, Utah people for 1,000 years will be saying, thank goodness for the Utah Watersheds Council. I was asked to express my view of it, and as I thought about it, the best thing I could do, and I'm not going to read this, but it'll be furnished to you later. This is the vision statement from the 2017 recommended state water strategy. It was titled recommended, but Governor Herbert stepped up to the microphone and said, I'm accepting this as the state water strategy. So that was good. He endorsed it. But going right to the end of it, we foresee working with the prior appropriation system to refine transparent, cost-effective, and fair processes to resolve conflicts and allocate water. We anticipate new levels of cooperative effort to collect data and conduct research necessary to ensure balanced and informed decisions consistent with this vision. So you're probably the forefront of that. I expect watershed councils will be the best tool to accomplish, from an institutional architecture standpoint, what this vision sees. So back to where we started. If you don't have a seat, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. What happens if I first wrote it, say, what if we don't work together? But it's really, what can happen if we do work together? So with that, I'll offer, go back to my backyard again. Your job is to see that we have balanced stakeholder engagement in water issues, that we have collective wisdom instead of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that we're forward-looking and coordinated in what we do. Thank you. I hope this has been useful to you. But there's one person's view, at least, of the history of why you're here today. So thank you, and back to you, Dan.
Excellent. Thanks, Warren. That was great. Really appreciate that. Does anybody have any quick questions for Warren at all? That kind of that history or how we got to where we're at today? No. Okay. Thank you, Warren. Candice, you want to take a minute, and then we'll, for all those you've been waiting for the break, it's almost here. So Candice, go ahead.
I have a short presentation if that's okay. I figured some pictures would be good. So, normally I like to start my presentations with a beautiful picture. And this one was actually provided by Weber Basin Water Conservancy District. And I guess it goes to kind of what this year has kind of brought to all of us. As you all know, we have been in an extreme drought this year, and the intensity that it came on and how we really had very little relief till August, really, at all, created this extreme situation. And I guess I'm just kind of making up a story that maybe it was a tough year for all of us. I know Ag and Kim Shelley at DQ. I mean, I've sat in tons of meetings with many of you on drought and talking through drought. And Chris, I appreciate all of your coordination this year. And so just to, not that we need to rehash it too much, but to highlight, this year also the Great Salt Lake was at an all-time low since they began monitoring the lake level in 1847. Lake Powell also dropped below their previous record low. So now I've got y'all depressed. I saw this sign, and some of you may have already seen this because I've shared it in a couple presentations. But I was driving, and this is like in July, right? And I'm driving down the road, and I see this, and it just resonated with me so much. I had to pull over and take a picture of it. Not to mind that we pay for ashes and crashes, but it's a great sign. I always love to look at what they creatively put up there. The good news is our situation is getting better, right? So if you compare July, that kind of extreme point in July, to just today, the drought monitor came out with 71% in extreme, and that's all the way up to with severe, moderate, and extreme, but no exceptional. So that's fantastic. We've seen our soil moisture improve. One of the hard parts is since we're coming off this really rough year, we have, over half of our biggest reservoirs are below 50% of capacity. So we have, we all recognize we needed this big snowpack to refill those reservoirs and to put us in a good situation. And we're doing pretty well, right? So hip hip hooray for the snow, and we hope that it keeps coming, and we're very excited about it. But it's still early, so we're gonna keep hoping it keeps coming. And so we're about 141% of normal right now, so that's great. So as part of the state of the water, I guess, for Utah, I can't help but thinking, and it's probably partially because in my organization we plan for 50 years into the future of kind of what's coming, what's around the corner. And one of the big things that we see and that you are probably all extremely aware of is we have projected population growth that will nearly double by 2065. And it's hard for me to wrap my brain around it. I'm not going to lie. I know it's coming. I know it's going to happen. But like even in my small town, I live in North Ogden, and even in my small town, my beloved farms around my house are now popping up as development. And I see it. And I recognize that not only do I have to share my water and my trails and my, recreation. And, my mom once told me that I was not a very good sharer. So I've got some growing to do as a person because I'm going to have to share more. But, one of the opportunities that we have at my division and in our planning agency is we get to model what these projected outcomes mean. And we've taken the last about 4 years to improve our modeling so we can do scenario demand modeling. And I'm not going to get into all the details. I'm mainly just going to show you some results and talk a little bit more. But really, we modeled 3 scenarios, and so the no change scenarios is really just like if we just take the expected growth rates, how we look today as far as our landscaping, how we use water and project that forward, which I recognize that's not realistic. But for me, it gives me a good sense of like, I know what we use right now, and I recognize our landscaping and how we're growing and all those things. So that's kind of our no change scenario. And if we look at our baseline, if we have the expected growth rates, but we meet our regional water conservation goals, and I'm happy to go through any of this in the future if you want more details, or we just are working on our water resources plan at the moment that you guys can review. If we have higher efficiency household appliances and landscapes, and then climate change is happening, it's impacting our water supplies, it's impacting our demands. So with a 11% increase in our demands there, and then I'm sorry, the baseline didn't include the regional water conservation goals. That's the second one with the water conservation goals. So generally speaking, we do these charts as engineers probably, where we have the x-axis has time, and the y-axis has volume, and you can kind of look at those three scenarios. And this assumes that the 2015 reliable supply will stay constant into the future, which we recognize that could change on a variety of ways. We could add more, dig bigger wells, we can increase our supply that way. And we are going to have impacts from climate change. So that could change, but this is just making that baseline assumption. And then we also recognize that through willing seller and willing buyer, agriculture is changing from, ag lands like I talked about around my house into housing units. And so what will that potential water come from those areas? And then we also added what could be the impacts of climate change on our supply. So it's when we look at charts like this, it's a little difficult, right? Because, you're like, well, if we really conserve and do okay, we might make it to 2070 without too much problems. The challenge is that's assuming that 2015 reliable supply stays the same way. And if this year's, if we experience more like years like this, which there's a high likelihood, that may not be the case. And then we also recognize that we can't share water from Bear River to St. George, so we broke these down into areas, including the Wasatch Metro area, which includes the Wasatch Front and the Wasatch Back. So you can see what those charts compare. And then also in the Kanab Virgin River Basin, where their one supply of the Virgin River and their really extreme growth is going to cause them some real challenges and why they're looking for additional supplies. So that being said, I've thought a lot about, the Division of Water Resources. So this is our 75th year anniversary, and we've done amazing work, and we're going to compile that and share that as a document out with the water community, because it's pretty exciting and something to highlight all the opportunities that we've had to be involved in. But as we look into the future, we're really seeing this competing uses and needs for water. The Great Salt Lake. We had a fantastic Great Salt Lake Summit. And how do we protect Great Salt Lake? And how do we continue to grow? And we have some real hard choices ahead of us as not only a water community, but as a state. And we're going to all have to work together to achieve those, or to get through those, like I said before, because the future is uncertain. So that's pretty much all I had to share with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Candice. Anybody have any questions for Candice? Mark?
I do want to say one thing, because the first picture she used for my employer, Ogden City, that was a picture of the reservoir that Weber Basin takes water from for multiple purposes that Ogden City relies upon, and that, lots of other ag users. And I got to say, it could have been way worse than it was. That picture shows, at least according to the information I have, the second lowest level that reservoir has reached in at least the last probably 40 years. And yet, because of collaboration, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. And that's not a great, maybe like rah cry, but I think that's what you can do when you're working together.
I totally agree. And thank you for bringing that up, because that is one of the big benefits that happened this year, is all the collaboration and the response that occurred. So
excellent. Great. Thanks. Peter?
And Dan, I know you got clock management to do here, so I don't know if you'd want to address it, but and your comment, Mark, and the presentation, maybe we've got such a great cross section of so many agencies and sectors of the economy and government. I'm just curious as to what that did look like in your business, in your cities, in your agencies, for each of you, because it cuts and affects us in so many different ways, but there is certainly levels of commonality to it. And if there's any commonality, it's, I think, what Mark talks about in terms of the coming together and coming to those solutions. But
yeah, very good. Okay, you're right. I do have a clock management task here. So let's do this. We're at 2:21 right now. So why don't we let's take a 9-minute break. So we'll get going again at 2:30. So get some caffeine and use the restroom and be ready to go. And so we'll get going again at 2:30. Okay, thanks.
failed to mention this at the beginning, but in front of you, there's a handout of council members, members of the Division of Water Resources and the Langdon Group that are contacts and for you to take home and put in a binder or whatever, so you have that with you. However, if some of this information is wrong for you at the top, make sure you sign in over there, give us your name, email, and phone number so we have the correct contact information. That was all I had.
Okay, great. Thanks, Todd. Okay. Peter and I are going to now do the part that I'm sure you all just are so excited for, which is to go through the governing policies. And this in the act, it talks about that as one of those first things we have to do. So we're fulfilling law here. So we need to get this done. So Peter, I think, has done a great job of drafting, and you all should have in front of you this draft. It's pretty easy to read. We're not going to go through it all line by line, but I just want to have Peter maybe take a minute and go through and give you some of his thoughts on it. Oh, Warren, we need you to mute if you can. There we go. Okay, so Peter's going to go through and touch on some of the high points in the draft we handed out. Does it have those parts shaded? Yes. It does. Okay. So yeah, when you take this home, it does have, in the parts where we need some of your thoughts and feedback, the document has little shaded portions. And so what our goal will be is in our next agenda, our next meeting, that will be one of the things we go through is finalizing this document. So let me ask you all a procedural question here. One thought I had today was that we could take this and either put it on SharePoint or Google Docs. And if you want to go in and add your thoughts and ideas, that's kind of an easy way to do it. And it's all in a living document. You can see what the rest of the group's thoughts are because they'll be in there as well. Would that be helpful for you if we did something like that? Or do you just want to email us your thoughts and ideas, or what works best? Kim? Google, okay. Okay. Is everybody else okay with that if we just put it in a Google Doc and share it? Okay. That's what we'll do. We'll put this in Google Doc. Okay, Peter, do you want to just walk through that and kind of hit some of the highlights and parts you want people to think about?
Sure. We're talking about the document Utah Watersheds Council Rules of Order and Procedure. That's one we're doing first, right?
Yep.
Great. I'll probably use more words to explain it than are actually written in the policy. So why is this rules of order procedure as opposed to articles of incorporation or any number of other whatever terms that lawyers like to attach to things? This is, excuse me.
Okay. I just got a breaking announcement that what we're going to have, we have a couple folks that may have to leave early. And one of the things we have to get done to get everybody's vote on while we have quorum is about the having virtual meetings. So if let's hit pause and we'll do a gear shift to go over to our, thanks, Allison. So if you go to the third page, we're going to go ahead and do this part about the adopt electronic meeting resolution rule. So what we're going to do on this one, Peter will do a 50,000 foot flyover of this one. We're then we have to open it up for public comments. So if any of you that are here sitting in the back, if you have any thoughts or comments about the electronic meeting resolution or rule, we'll give you a chance to share your thoughts, and then we'll, as a group, have a vote if everybody supports that virtual meeting rule. Okay, so I want to do that before we lose anybody. So, okay, back to you again, Peter. You want to just touch on kind of like some of the key points of that?
Sure. So Allison, I think, did a really great job of succinctly getting to the point, and I think you've heard it repeatedly. We can't have anyone participating via Zoom or any other electronic medium until we get this. Utah code requires you have the policy. This is the policy. This is one that we have used with other government entities under these same laws. So basically, Department of Natural Resources will always serve as the anchor location where members of the public that do not wish to access the meeting electronically may come in person to observe and to comment on those things that are required to be open for public comment. Otherwise, there are means here in which the council can decide whether individual members can make a motion to or request that it be held electronically. But this will be what allows you to do what a number wanted to do and are not able to today, and probably others that are here really wish they could for any multitude of reasons, to be able to hold these via a Zoom or other electronic means. What you're seeing in a lot of the rest of the government difference is they managed to get together and do this beforehand, and that's what we're doing today. Don't know if that's oversimplistic or too much, but any questions?
Quick question.
Please.
Didn't the legislation say that the meetings could be held at other locations?
Yes. So if you look at this under B, what that means is that this is an anchor location where the public may always show up to participate.
So
You
regardless of the
physically
meeting
may be located anywhere else. But what we're saying is that this will always be the location where the public may show up for an electronic meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you're, this is Marcel, yes, thank you. I don't know if you're taking comments or questions on the content, but I'm thinking that in the notice, to try to put ahead of time that there's a description of how many members of the council will be connected to the electronic meeting could be difficult. I mean, I could see myself in a situation where suddenly I have to make that decision right at that point in time. And so I just think that that actually puts a burden that is unnecessary, and I would strike that if you asked my opinion, or I'd ask that we could strike that unless there's some requirement under law that would require that. It includes the public notice shall include the agenda, date, time, location, which all makes sense.
Yeah.
And a description of how many members of the council will be connected to the electronic
You're
meeting.
putting in an extra word there, Marcel, or else maybe we're looking at different draft.
In item C?
And description of how the members will connect, not how many.
Okay. Well,
Basically,
but then what is that?
Are
Just
you using
the
Zoom
link?
or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or WebEx?
All right. Sorry for misreading. Thank you.
No, and if I need to swap some words or move it to make that more readable, that is what we're going for. I agree with you. We cannot do a head count in terms of virtual attendance beforehand.
So is the description just merely the connection information?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me see if there's a way I could. Okay. How about I take out the words "the members of"? Is that what you want? Okay. Okay, so now I have that second sentence reading, the public notice shall include the agenda, date, time, location, and description of how the council will be connected to electronic meeting. And I think that works on my end too. Yeah, thank you. That is better, yeah. That is.
Any other thoughts?
Thanks. Just a quick question. So clearly we have to comply with the Open Meetings Act. So will this also be posted on the public notice webpage and not just on the water or on Candice's webpage, I guess? Is that right?
It is posted on the public notice page and we will follow all the Open Public Meeting Act rules.
Just, yeah,
that's a good question.
I did get an email from about that. So this meeting is on the public notice webpage. It's not on the water resources. It will be in the future, but it's so if you heard
Yes.
that, you see it will be.
Yeah, and up above it does mention the Utah Public Notice website. We're also trying to funnel that information to the one for the council. Yeah.
Okay. Any other edits, Marcel? Yeah.
Just one more question at the very end, availability of the policy. Can you hear me okay? This policy shall be made available to the public at each meeting of the council and shall be posted on the website. how is it made available to the public at each meeting, or is it just through the public notice? And do you have to have copies of this at a meeting like this, or?
So the act that created the watershed councils, it requires that that these rules of order and procedure and all policies be available to the public at each meeting. I'm not familiar enough with grandma or anything. I doubt that's a baseline requirement for every agency. That would be weird. But for this, it does require that these policies be available to the public. That is a statutory requirement for a watershed council. So I would recommend that we have at least a couple of printed copies available at each meeting. And I'm not going to go beyond that other than to say the website is also required. And boy, it would be nice if you could just give them the link and
okay,
rather than having to kill more trees to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Oh, sorry.
God, I'm terrible at this. Okay, so if we don't have any other, Scott, do you have something? No? Okay.
I'm just ready to make a motion if you don't.
Okay. Well, let me ask if anybody that's attending not here on the council, any other thoughts from the attendees here today? Any from the public? Nope. Okay. So, Scott.
I don't even know if this is appropriate, but so I make a motion that we, as a council, adopt the Utah Watersheds Council electronic meeting policies and procedures with the amendments that were talked about.
Great. Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. Commissioner Butters seconds that. Okay, very good. Okay, that means we can have a virtual meeting in part next time.
You didn't vote.
Oh, we have to vote. Okay. I got overly excited. Okay. By
He's
show
not
of
used to
hands,
procedures.
those in favor of this motion, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Okay, or say aye. Either, both. Okay, thanks. We're good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our creating our governing policies. So, Peter, you were starting off really well, and I had to interrupt you there, but
you threw off my groove.
I know. So again, I just want to reiterate that the idea here is this gives you something to chew on, gives you a draft that we can play with, and Peter's going to touch on some of the highlights and things we want you to think about for the next meeting. Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Great. So that was yeah. This is a whole separate thing now. You've got your policy. That's the one thing we're taking action on today, and absolutely had to because, well, heck, there's Corey. I mean, did you drive up this morning? I mean, technology is a blessing. I'm very much a face-to-face guy, but boy, we got a big state, and anyway, glad you made the trip. What I've tried to do is use gray to mark things that were kind of my putting in something that's at the council's discretion. But what I attempted to do also was to provide a framework. So think of this as sort of the, largely bare bones version of what you can kind of, a starting place. It's always easier to pick something apart than it is to kind of conceptually build something from scratch in your brain. So think of this as your what. Think if I were Mark Stratford, how would I brutalize this document? Was that about right, Warren? Did I get that? Anyway, I think I got that right. I apologize to those that aren't deep in the water community. I'll try to cut down the inside humor, and I'll get to the point. So what I have here in Section I, Role, Authority, and Duties. Section 1 there is almost a straight cut and paste from the act that created this, the Watershed Council Act. The reason I did that is because you don't want to have to carry around the bill all the time. And so think of this as sort of the guiding star. This is something that having it up front and center, this is the easy reference. This is what you can always come back to when you say, why are we here? What role are we supposed to take? And I think Section 2 and 3 are very much in that same vein. And you'll notice in section 2, if I need to call it out better or differently, again, take this home and pick it to pieces. That put in that it's not a regulatory body, right? If we need to call that more clearly, we can. And then section 3, straight out of the act. That's one thing that's 100% clear are the reporting things that are required. And section 4, yes, Division of Water Resources is handles the staffing. Membership also, the membership is determined by statute. The rights of members, want to touch on that more clearly, more in depth. So what you have here, it says proxy votes are not permitted unless otherwise allowed by duly adopted policy. And it says the same thing about electronic meetings. So we just negated the second part of that because it says you can't have an electronic meeting unless you adopt a policy. Well, we adopted the policy. And actually the Watershed Council Act does say you can, if the council chooses to, you can designate someone to represent you in one meeting or multiple meeting if you adopt a policy to do that. So think of this, even though it says you can't, it's also saying you can, but you adopt a policy, which is what the act says. So that is something that but clearly by statute, it says that you can adopt a policy to have someone either for one meeting or multiple meetings to be there in your stead. I do consider that to be, interpret that to mean that, yes, you might have been appointed by some group or whatever, some of you by statute, like the directors of the agencies it's obviously, that's your name there. But even those appointed by governor or whatever, that you personally have the authority to, if a policy is adopted, to then appoint someone in your stead to show up. So that gives a couple of ways to continue participation, right? Whether it's you personally through electronic means or designating someone to attend in your stead, whether for one meeting or for longer, if you pass a policy to do so, entirely within your discretion. Term length, entirely up to you. I put 3 years because it's a number. I think 2 years is too short. I think that about Congress too. Whether there's a term limit, up to you. Staggering is required, and it's a good idea anyway, in my opinion. But staggering of initial terms is required. So what you see there in the list, A through G, I just took them as they are ordered in the act itself. It's not that I want UAC and the other 2023s to have to turn over more sooner than the others. It's just the order they were in. You can pick the first year if you want to put the first change in membership to occur in 2030. You're welcome to do so. Entirely up to you. So term length, when the initial terms expire, who's staggered when, up to you.
Let's maybe take a minute. Any thoughts on that? About how you guys would like to do that? About staggering and term limits? Things maybe you've seen work in other things you've been a part of, or
I don't have a comment on that one particularly, but we probably should add an H that invites the local watershed council members into this policy or integrates them into it when they are appointed by their respective local councils. Because they will be official members of the Utah Watersheds Council at some point.
Did you have a comment on that, Mark?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we might need to do a little bit, and maybe this is what the Google Doc can let us do. We might have maybe different rules for appointed members through the governor than from the local water councils. I certainly think we need to include something in here about those other members, but I don't know if we'll have rules about how long we want each of those individuals to serve from a local council, for example, if once they're designated.
I don't want to do too much interpreting. the statute does list those seats that I have listed there as those that will be staggered in terms. I don't interpret that necessarily, although maybe ask the AG's office. I don't know that I would interpret that as precluding the state council's ability to do that for local watershed councils.
I mean staggered on this board, not on their local board.
Oh, no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
I know what you're saying. But as far as for those named, such as the 3 agency heads, and we also have Dustin and Chris, wasn't it? Oh, what do you know? You know, here as agency heads, I'm much more hesitant to say that might be a possibility in terms of saying when they have to be swapped out, because what we do have is that we do have the appointing process that each member that is removed has to be appointed in the same way that they're listed, and that is statutory. So I don't know that those could be have the rollover other than those that naturally come in that position. That's just my initial read, but I like the idea that hopefully that can be further fleshed out and developed in the Google Doc.
This is Ricky. I do have one other question. There are sometimes occasions where board members, their term expires, perhaps as part of the normal rotation, or they have to step down. Some boards, by statute, are allowed to have that individual continue to serve to fill that seat until a reappointment is made. And in some boards, that is not the case, and the seat goes vacant. Do we have statutory direction there?
Again, the terms can really be of any length. I think that with that flexibility, that could allow for that person there to. I think we could add a sentence saying that they continue to serve until, especially where you have to wait on the governor to. Yeah. Should I try to? Anyway, is that an audit? Shall I insert that language, or are we just going to have people edit and get into that?
I think if you all have things that you observe and you want us to add, we'll go ahead and add that before we put it on the Google Doc. That way it's captured there, and you can then you guys can give your thoughts and ideas then.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And Todd, I got your comment about local on there as well.
Yeah, I can get that in there. Should I?
Yeah, I realize that this section's talking about council member terms, not necessarily members.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Which is addressed in section 1. So the local watershed councils appoint their members, and this one just describes the terms for those that are appointed. If the statute doesn't allow, if it's not necessary for those to be term limited or time limited, then I'd agree you wouldn't have to add it to this. But
I do think you could say, well, this council, if their participants should be rotated, they need to reappoint that person every however many years. I think that's legal.
Okay.
Not required. Like I said, think of this as more of a skeleton. You can make this 3 times as long. You can fill it with all sorts of things, and I hope it can be living and ultimately something that helps guide. I think policies adopted pursuant to this as well are real opportunities there. But absolutely, this is, again, I tried to hit the bare minimums and maybe a tiny bit more, but to the extent you want to expand into those other things, I'm just trying to, where I see things that I don't think are allowed as it's written, like, well, it's going to be the director of DEQ. There's lots of other government entities where it's like someone doesn't behave, there's a process to kick them off. Well, I don't, personally, the way I read, I don't think you can. Maybe put in rules to, have some sort of create a timeout corner. I don't know, but yeah.
Okay.
So I think of this as open.
Okay.
This is a way to make it yours. Right.
Let's keep moving
Sorry.
along here.
Yes. Section 4, member responsibilities. I colored it gray. This is just me copying from other things that I was working from in terms of developing this framework. More there as food for thought. If you want sort of things about behavior and what each person's supposed to do, think about putting it there. If you want to strike it entirely, that's fine too. 5 and 6, I'd consider to be straight from statute. The officers, Roman numeral 3, the officers you're required to have are a chair and vice chair. The length of the terms, entirely up to you. The manner in which they're selected, up to you. The duties of each office, up to you. Whether you have other officers, up to you. When you have the elections, up to you. Term limits, up. Are you getting the pattern here? One thing required, you have a chair and a vice chair. Other than that, a lot of latitude.
Let's take a quick second. Any thoughts on
No, sorry. Thanks, Allison. Any thoughts on this one? What you all and other things you're part of, what do you like? What do you not like?
This is Corey. I'll just throw out a few things. And so time of year, it looks like we're looking at quarterly meetings. And the first meeting of the year would be in the first quarter. And that would be coincident with the legislative session.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that tends to be kind of a busy time period for a lot of people. I'm on some boards to where we particularly avoid that time of year for our transition in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be an option to consider a different quarter in the year to do that. Not necessary, but just something to think about.
Yeah.
In some organizations where consistency or just learning the organization is beneficial, I see that there's some benefit to having longer term terms in office or having a natural transition, having the vice chair move up to the chair so that you have a time in office and some observation time. I think that could be something that could be beneficial here and would recommend that.
Okay.
So even if it is a 1 year in each of those office, but to have a natural progression from vice chair to chair and something like that.
Very good.
Okay, good.
I'll work those in.
Any other thoughts on staggering or so I guess our thought was on the chair, vice chair, that would be in the agenda for the next meeting we have. Any other thoughts on how you want that to work or term limits too, Mark?
Well, as I was looking, and Peter's going to tell me if I'm wrong again, but or if I need to be corrected in some way. But the statute does say that we could have. It says we just have to select at least one vice chair. So I maybe we can think about whether or not we want more than one vice chair, or maybe we adopt these now or at our next meeting, and then think about, do we want a vice chair for other purposes, but we're not limited to one.
That's correct. Yeah. Minimum one chair, one vice chair. You can have 18 vice chairs. You can have a sergeant at arms. You can have a quartermaster. Yes. Yeah. Think about those other officers. I don't see needing a treasurer beyond that. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I did add chair pro tem, that 100% optional. Just saw that in what I was working from and left it. Meetings, section 1, 2, 3, attempted to pull those straight out of the act or other statutes. Definitely want to make sure that's one where definitely be relying on the AG's office to make sure I covered those properly. But those are the specific things referenced in the act. Section 4, regular meetings. I want to point out real quick that quarterly that you noticed there in advance, Corey. Under statute, the council only needs to meet semi-annually. Yeah. Nice. So so I put quarterly. That number's entirely up to you.
Let's take a second on that one too. So any preferences that y'all have for quarterly or semi-annually? Marcel?
I think quarterly is good. I would also just suggest that there's an option to meet more frequently, there might be reasons to do that. And if for some reason also a quarterly meeting couldn't be held, that there's some flexibility in moving that. I mean, hopefully we'll not have any more of these 2021 and 22 years, but or 2020 and 2021 years, but I don't know, that might be too hard to write it so that you could move the quarterly, but
Well, realistically, other than saying semi-annual, you can have any number or any method of selecting it so long as we meet the notice requirements. So think of that as largely open to how you want to proceed.
Could they say a number versus a time of year? Like quarterly makes it seem like every quarter, but could you just say
Quarterly does seem that way.
So you could just say 4 meetings a year, and then you could move them whenever you wanted, in theory.
Yeah, you could say at least 2 and no more than 12. I mean, whatever, and say how a meeting will be called. Just however you want to, 2 people make a motion for me. However you want to do it. However you want to do it.
I'd love to hear your preferences while we're all here together. Any other? Let's just do this. If you want to meet, if you think 4 times a year, why don't we raise your hand? 1, okay. How about if you want 2 times a year, raise your hand. Okay, if you're undecided.
I like the concept of semi-annually and then as necessary, because for the first year or 2, we're going to meet more often. There's no question about it.
Right.
Just to get things established and things. So, but after we're established and until we get all the local watershed councils attending and participating in, we might not need to meet quite as often.
Right.
So I was wondering along those lines if it should say at least semi-annually with additional meetings called by the chair. I don't know about if we need to have a vote of 2 members, but I think if the chair is aware of what's going on, the chair could call additional meetings.
All right. Thoughts on that? You guys, does that sound good?
Yeah,
some head
I would
nods,
say
yes?
we do that. We have the Emergency Management Administration Council, and by statute, we're required to meet twice a year as well. And it basically says that as a minimum of 2 times per year. It doesn't say quarterly or anything, or at the call of or discretion of the chair. So
okay,
I
good.
would agree with that.
Great. I think especially once we add the local watershed councils and we've talked about thoughts, concerns, needs roll up from those, I think it could affect how often we meet. And as was mentioned earlier, there might be times that we go and meet in those places too, around the state. That might be valuable to this group. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts about meeting? Allison, you threw out a thought about, should we go ahead and we can do this at the end of our meeting, but I think we should leave today with planning when our next meeting is going to be, but we'll wrap that up at the end. Okay. Any other thoughts thus far? Anything we should tackle while we're all here together instead of in Google Docs? Okay, Peter, keep rolling.
Okay. Section 5, federal liaisons. When discussing who was on the council, the state council, it does say that the council may invite federal agencies as liaisons to the committee, meaning they're not voting. It's a matter of, again, building on that principle of getting these agencies talking and communicating and building relationships. So again, Section 5 can be stricken in its entirety. Nothing required that it be there. This is, again, more to draw your attention to that. I put a list of, I'm not going to even try a punchline. There's 5 federal agencies that we thought might be in that group. It can be a lot larger or again, non-existent.
So let me throw out a quick thought for everybody. So in all those interviews I've done, one of the things that came out from just about all of them was about funding. And so when I met with NRCS, Forest Service, Bureau of Reclamation, they all talked about how they have pools of money that are available that would work great with watershed councils. And Bureau of Reclamation talked about a whole, Justin Record talked about a whole pool of money that's just there for if you meet collaboratively. And so, Oregon and Colorado and some of these other states, their watershed councils are funded. But Utah, ours are not. But what I've been learning is that there's a lot of folks out there that have money that they feel like they could work really well with watershed councils. So I think that's kind of a thing to think about when you think about the inclusion of the federal agencies, is which ones have those types of grants and funding resources. When I've met with the local folks and in these interviews, they've talked about, gosh, if there's a way that they could learn and get networked into these different funding sources and resources that are available, it'd be very helpful to them. So anyways, just throw that out as something maybe to think about is when you think about federal agencies. Scott?
So to accept funding like that, do you have to be set up as a nonprofit organization? I would think.
I don't know that I don't know how that works yet with watershed councils receiving money.
Okay.
The way that it looks the most right now is that being able to have a way to get that information out about what those funding sources are and how they function and all that kind of stuff, so that the on the ground agencies that are there that are looking for that money could know about it. This one's been interesting too, because there are places in the state where people know about those grants, and then they find out, or people that don't know about it, then they find out somebody else in the state was doing it, and they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known about that.
So Dan, Mark and I have been scheming over here. We have 2 other federal agencies we'd like to add.
Great.
EPA, of course, because they do fund our non-point source grants, as well as USDA and NRCS might be an option as well. So I am I'd like to broaden it and get as many federal partners as we can.
Excellent, great. And thus far, all the feds I've talked to are like stoked. They're like, oh, this is going to be so great to have a shop to go to. Yeah.
And Kim, building on that, in terms of broadening it, I don't know if they have funding for projects like this available, but they would certainly be an important partner in some areas of our state, would be the Bureau of Land Management as well.
Sure, you bet.
So I do have to point out that I do have BLM and NRCS on there. And that technically Forest Service is part of USDA as well.
Yeah.
It's
on another draft,
good
Peter.
with what?
It's this draft only has. Yes, sorry.
Why did you send out that one?
Yeah.
Well, no wonder. I was like, "What are you? All you reading some of?" Yes, you are. You are.
And they are.
You actually are. Yes, I didn't. Thank you for bringing up EPA. Just leave that there.
Happy to do that. And I hear Todd say USGS as well. I think that's a great addition.
Oh, yeah. I think of, and I'm telling the truth when I say this, Kim, I think of the Division of Water Quality as the part of EPA that matters in Utah. But
me too.
Yeah. So
great.
Okay. Yeah. USGS.
One thing really quickly. This is Corey. I just want to note that it's funding is a big thing. But then just watershed management is bigger. And we have our federal agencies, the BLM and the Forest Service in particular, that are managing those grounds. And we see a lot of issues that we would like to change and improve. And then the other aspect would be permitting. Is a lot of our federal agencies are just paralyzed, and it's impossible to get things done. It takes so long, and it's so costly. And so those are other aspects of involving these agencies.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, the agencies have talked about that permitting aspect too. That they feel like there could be tons of efficiencies if everybody in the state had the same information. Yeah.
And local councils are encouraged to engage with those agencies on that level as well. But state level, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Does everybody know about the shared stewardship? A few head nods, because that might be seems like there's some concurrent big things going on, like with shared stewardship, but those might be things we think about in our agendas coming up, that we're all maybe have folks come talk about some of those things, so we're all on the same page there. But that kind of is a good example of some stuff we're talking about. Chris?
Yeah, this is Chris. I was just going to mention too that I think FEMA should be on there. And also, I was going to mention this is a little bit outside of just specifically federal agencies, but we currently have a group called the State Hazard Mitigation Team that brings a lot of these agencies together at the state and federal level, and they meet quarterly right now. So that might be an opportunity to involve them in some capacity because they've been meeting for years and talking about lots of issues, but including water issues. So
Great.
I would just recommend that as well.
Really good. I did speak with folks from WRI as well, and they're excited to come and participate too. Okay, Peter, you want to take us to the
I
finish here?
think we'll try and leave that a little open-ended as well.
Okay.
If there are others, and maybe it sounds like maybe I should be a little broader than just federal. By what you're saying there, Chris.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, subcommittees. The statute says that in the meeting you need to adopt policies to govern the state council's activities, and that's what we're going over right now. It says including policies for the creation of subcommittees, and that may less than a quorum. So the rest of that is the language you see there. So I'm not sure if having a policy that says that you can create subcommittees according to those provisions counts, or if we're looking for something more specific as to the process. Again, not talking about naming a specific subcommittee right now. It's meant to be flexible, but if maybe you might want to flesh that out in terms of what would the process be, and maybe in general, the idea of what process do you go through to adopt a policy for the council? Is there the same procedure for any sort of policy you want to develop? Is there a separate track for how you create a subcommittee to address some issue? Its own set of rules for how to initiate one of those subcommittees. That makes sense.
I will throw out another thing I've noticed too with subcommittees is some of the local watershed councils are so big that the folks I've been meeting with at those local ones are really struggling to see how they'd make one council. So this idea of maybe having subcommittees within the local watershed councils, even some of the smaller ones like the Utah Lake, the Provo River Watershed Council, and then you have the Utah Lake folks and potentially the Utah Lake Authority, and then you have like Juab County, the two counties to the south. Those folks all feel like there's kind of like three distinctly separate things, and they don't necessarily really want to be merged all together. So that might be something we play with in the future with the local watershed councils, is around potentially this idea of subcommittees has been brought up multiple times. So just have that in the back of your mind as we work to form these local watershed councils. That comment has come up a lot. So do you have consternation there?
Well, what I would say is I see using the kind of the underlying principle of the subcommittee thing, but I don't think it would have to adhere to that if it's an idea of using the authority to develop a policy in terms of allowing that flexibility for the local councils. I think that's very much, in my opinion, within the wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then procedures, default. These are pretty boilerplate, though. If you have some more creative way you'd like to, although I do have to say that Section 3 there, majority vote, that is from the statute. It was clear that the principle here, so it's the difference between a majority of the quorum present versus a majority of the council. We're talking about a majority of the council. The reason for that was that this is not meant to be, where when you're done, the secretary counts the for and against. This is about bringing together people and trying to build that consensus and work towards those common solutions. So that's why it's written that way rather than just what you would more typically see the majority of the quorum present. So I would say you can't change section 3 there, but everything else is open there.
I guess I have a question for clarification. You're making reference to these the local councils, about these subcommittees, I'm understanding this is for the state, right?
Correct.
Yes, it is.
So I didn't want to get confused here.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good distinction. I just wanted to bring that up because as we go into this next year and we get the local watershed councils
Right.
going, that comment it's been one of like the top 3 comments that I get is that one. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. Is all, Corey.
Will there be separate rules and policy for the local groups, I guess, right? The local councils.
Yep, they'll go through a similar process, kind of to what we're doing today, of talking about what do they want to do and where do they want to focus, and be able to have that kind of local ownership of their council and how it's put together. So,
okay,
yeah.
So just a follow-up question on that. So each of the councils will determine their own sort of charter. There won't be consistency between the local councils?
Peter, how would you answer
Yes.
that?
Yes. We, other than trying to provide some outlines for try to have a broad representation, so try to check certain boxes in terms of getting everyone to the table. Beyond that, would love to try to leave it very open to even how they conduct their meetings. And really even the point of naming those interests in terms of who should be engaged with, more to make sure that, and to give all of you, those are the criteria that you're going to use, because ultimately this is the group that certifies those local councils. Does what you have created qualify as one of these basin level local watershed councils? Well, do you have the representation that you need? Is this truly the representative cross section? You know, are we getting all the people to the table? Now you can make it as big as you want, but the point being, kind of let them determine their own fate. Even how each of those initial seats are filled when they expire, up to that council. So
the thing I'm seeing probably that we should anticipate the most is that each of one of those locals are going to have this geographically, as you move around the state, it's such distinctly different needs and issues they have. So for some, you go to Moab and it's tons of recreational growth and expansion, and that's a big driver. But yet you also have those that are still so strongly tied to ag. You kind of have some challenges like that there. Then you just hop to each one of these spots, and when I meet with them, they're all telling me really different things sometimes. Some people, it's like, gosh, we just need water storage. Others kind of relates to Kurt, where they have flooding or they have these other events that happen. So that's where I think with the local watershed councils, that's going to be part of their thing, is to figure out what's most important to them in their
do we
area.
Have a copy of the bill handy that we could put up on the screen there? Here,
maybe
just use your overhead projector, and I'll just read from this part because I refer to this a lot too. And I wrote this stupid thing. There were a lot of versions. So the local watershed council provide for an open and equitable system of governance, encourage participation by the locals, so it will come, you will be the group looking at their system of governance and saying, is this an open and equitable system? So, but if you want to, well, I don't know if we need to all look at that or not, but
I got it. Okay.
All right. So we're there on line 182, 183. The part I was reading from, page 7. Okay. So in terms of, but again, in terms of what constitutes a quorum and who needs to approve the actions, same deal as the state council.
Okay.
Is there a quorum defined for this council? I didn't see
A majority. So right now, 7.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Peter or information that would be helpful for you as you go back and look at this in Google Docs, or any of the things you feel like it would be best if we just tackle them right now? thoughts or concerns or ideas or? Everybody's good to go?
I guess a question I have, because deadlines help everyone, how long would we have to review it and provide comments? What's a reasonable amount of time ahead of our next meeting?
About 11:59 p.m. on March 8th. Does that work? All right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, so
If you got that punchline, you're spending too much
maybe
time in
let's
this
talk
world.
about schedule a little bit. So we have the legislative session. I'm sure you'd love to wait till that's over. So maybe we use that as kind of a benchmark that ends March 8th. Is that right? And that, so do we want to look at maybe like a week after that so everybody can catch back up on all their other tasks, and then we look to reconvene this group? It'd be great to be able to have these edits so we can get them all tidied up and everything before that meeting. That would be helpful.
No, when does it end? The 4th? It's the 4th.
The 4th, okay.
Oh, dang. So much for my punishment. I'll work on that. I apologize.
So what do you all think? When would you like to meet again next? In April? Okay. Is there preferences in April that are better for everybody else?
Probably for me, the third or fourth week, or maybe sometime after Easter. Looks like Easter's late this year, so.
Gotcha. So the 3rd or 4th, that would be the week of April 18th or the week of April 25th. And I guess one of the other questions too, are there any other like conferences or other things that will be happening around then that we need to be sensitive to?
I think the Bear River Commission meets on the 18th, if my calendar's right, of April. So I'd skip that.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I'm looking. Oh, I don't have my glasses on. That's
okay.
Sorry.
So that would be Tuesday, the April 19th. And I guess maybe another question for you all, is there a day that is better than another, or is this time meeting from 1 to 4? Does that work? Okay. Okay, so it seems like lots of head nods for 1 to 4. Is there a day that is not good for folks? Nope, okay. Are bad? Okay, that's good to know, Scott. Monday and Wednesday. So does that impact anybody? Potentially, Candice, will that? Okay, so do you want to look at Thursday, April 28th then? The following week?
I'm out of town all that week, but I don't want everyone to schedule around me.
Okay.
Could we do the Thursday that week?
No, that's Candice will be out on the 21st.
I can make that work. I think I was the one that was limiting it, but yeah, I can make that work.
Okay. April 14th, we thumbs up for that? Okay, great. Hey, that was not too bad. All right. So we'll go for Thursday the 14th from 1 to 4. So then if that's the case, if you all can get us your edits maybe a week in advance. So what if we went for Monday, April 4th, that we'd get everybody's edits by then? Would that work? Peter, give you enough time to massage that? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's shoot for that then, if that works for everybody. We'll go for April 4th to everybody have their edits in. Okay.
Should I, in that interim, would you all like me to prepare that proxy matter, the ability to appoint a representative in your stead? Yeah. Okay. I'll put one together and let you all edit that as well. We'll do the same deadline on that.
Okay. All right, we're almost there. Here's a kind of a thought. What we'd like to be able to understand from you is what are the things that you would like to tackle in this coming year, and so that we can start thinking about agenda and if we want to have people come in and speak or share other things or whatever we can do to make these meetings valuable for you. So I think one of the questions is, what do you want to accomplish this year? But also, I think a thing that helps that is, what are the challenges that the people you represent, what are they facing? And so what are those things that maybe we should all be thinking about? Obviously drought going on is one, but any other thoughts of the folks that you all work with and represent, things that are kind of that are challenging for them that we should be thinking about?
I don't know. I guess I kind of envisioned that a lot of the success and the real action that's going to take place is going to be on the local level. And then we're going to have a lot of correspondence back and forth with them and find out what local issues are and to see if we can address those here, see if there's benefits that we can address. But I guess I see that or envision that much of the real world problem solving and solutions are going to be implemented on the ground at the local level, and we're not going to solve those day-to-day issues. I think we can broach some issues and do what we can, but I don't know.
Yeah, gotcha. Kim?
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back to what I said at the beginning. We do have these existing watershed councils, and I want to make sure we need to kind of focus on how we can incorporate them and their good work, and we don't lose everything the gains that have been made by those groups. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty by those groups because of this council, and
right.
the boundaries don't exactly line up, and I just want to make sure we can give them some certainty.
Do you think that we should have some of those people present to this group?
Yeah, that is great. And some of them, like the Uinta one that's just starting up with, we've been on their call several times. Now it has been so helpful to learn what they're doing and to compare notes. So that definitely is an idea that we could look at, having some of those existing groups. And then since we have the virtual meeting thing, they could participate really easily too and share some of those. What do you think, Kim? Would that be?
I think that's great. And yeah, to have them be included in part of this process, I think that's great.
Okay, good. I'll tell you one other thing I noticed too is there is a really strong desire by the staff from all the different state agencies to get to know their peers. It seems like at the executive level, everybody knows each other pretty well, has good working relationships. And then when you get to kind of that project level from the different agencies, people are like, I don't even know who my peer is at that other agency. And so Todd mentioned earlier, the Water Resources has the area planning specialists. Those folks all have other primary assignments, don't they? And so I think that's kind of, you see that with a number of the agencies at staff level, they all have multiple jobs, including areas they're responsible for. Like when I met with Trout Unlimited, a lot of those different groups, they have area assigned folks that they don't know who their peers are from the state. So that I do think it kind of goes to your point about getting at the local level. But it's, yeah, definitely at the staff to staff. Hopefully that's making sense. But there is a lot of opportunity there, I think. So I don't know how we address that with this body, but it's a concern or area for opportunity that's there. Yeah, Marcel.
I really like the idea of having some of the watershed groups come in and talk about what they're working on, what the issues are that they see. I also wonder just two things. When maybe this was when people were brainstorming about the Watershed Council Act, I thought there was a list somewhere or something that showed what are all those different smaller sub-basin groups out there. And I don't know if you guys have that. It'd be really great to see. And then one more thing around that, in terms of your interviews that you did, and I know there was an email kind of summarizing some key points, is there an assessment document that kind of comes out that you guys are putting out that has more detail in it or information?
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts there. One is that, especially early on, a lot of the groups, organizations, agencies we met with, Kim talked about, that those boundaries don't necessarily all match up. And so one of the things we started learning that really early on. So we started asking folks to send us their shape files so that we could make this GIS map to see who's doing what and where, knowing that this council was going to convene. And so that would be something I could put together and bring to that. We've got a whole bunch of information. It'd be good to get it all. So it's very helpful when you see it visually, see the whole state and who's doing what where. So we could easily do that. Yeah. Corey.
So one of our responsibilities is to facilitate the establishment of the local watershed councils and then certify them. So what's our role here versus Todd and your staff? And I guess we need to determine how that's going to work.
Do you want to tackle that, Todd?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I think when we cross that bridge, having a process of certification that just is in your policies and procedures would help address that, or standardize it, so you're treating each council certification process the same, just meeting basic criteria that's outlined in the legislation, et cetera.
Maybe a thought to add to that, in the act, it talks about year one goals of having the statewide council up and then having 2 local watershed councils. So I think that might be a part of what I could bring when I can give that the findings from all that assessment. I could share with you kind of my thoughts about the ones that seem like they're low-hanging fruit to look at, and some of the reasons why. Kind of what I've been thinking about on that one is, if we could find 2 that represent a lot of the other things that are going on in the state, it would make it a lot easier for those other councils to then, for us to go through that process and for those other ones to form. And so that's kind of, I do have 2 in mind that have kind of been seen from that lens, and I could come with that recommendation or thoughts for you for the next meeting if you want. Yeah, Mark.
Going back to Methuselah's comment about not knowing what we don't know, I am wondering though. So before our next meeting will be Utah water users, and I don't know if and we don't have a chair or whatever, but I don't know if there should be some either information there about what is going on here, or I don't know if there's enough to do a presentation as far as not knowing what we don't know. But I just wondering if there should be some presence at water users, or if that's maybe an agency, thing that they would do. I'm just wondering what that might look like.
Gotcha. So do you have any volunteers want to present Candice?
So I have been in discussions about getting a presentation at water users.
Oh, okay.
It currently wasn't on the agenda, but we're working on it. That being said, I guess I had envisioned maybe Todd and Dan kind of talking about it from the state perspective, but it would be really awesome if, one of you were interested either presenting or being there to kind of talk about it and what your hopes and dreams are. A watershed council panel is a great idea. So that's just a little information.
Okay.
But I think it's a great idea, because there's already a lot of questions about what we're doing at the state level and what they're expecting.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think it's a great idea to have something there to just let them know where we're at, where our plans are going in the fairly near future.
Sure. In fact, it could just be a matter of Todd and I doing an update or something like that in the general session, maybe even if it's like a 3 to 5 minute thing, even that would be helpful.
If I could recommend, if you're in this room and not going, and this is some of your early forays into the water world, highly recommend it. And if you've never been, we could put a little special lanyard on you, so unaccompanied water users attendee. And no, it's a good place to mingle with the water community. And I don't know, I have funny ideas. I'd love to see futures where it can be a place where the watershed councils have get-togethers and as well.
What might be helpful for that is if we had some of the folks that are on the statewide council that maybe people don't normally typically think of for watershed stuff, like maybe, Chris and Ricky, they kind of represent two things that are kind of different than the large water conservancy districts, or I don't know, maybe that's an idea, something to play with, where people could see that this has, different thoughts and ideas too. I don't know.
I think that's a great idea, and I guess it would be whoever's willing to attend or planning on attending, and maybe Allison, you could send out some information on water users to the group for those that aren't aware of it, or the dates and all those type of things. One other thought or consideration for the council, and I love the idea of shared learning. I think we just gain so much by having similar facts and understanding and all being on the same page. And one of the things Dan and I have talked a lot about, and he mentioned it earlier, was the kind of funding issue, that this legislation, this statute didn't come with that much funding or for the local watershed councils. So I think it could be interesting to have presentations on what those funding sources are, what options they could be, how could they help this council, how could they potentially help local watershed councils, and be able to compile those resources for that group, for this group and the locals.
I like it. That'd be good. And one of the questions too is if there was funding, can they do anything through or related to the watershed council? So maybe that's something we could flesh out too.
Well, and along those lines, if I might add, it might be interesting for the council to sponsor a session with different, with all the federal money that's coming through, with those different agencies, even though they do their own kind of presentations. Bureau Rec does that, but to get them to kind of all present in one meeting that could be recorded, and then that's available to the local watersheds. But that's probably a bigger thing, but or you can do it individually by agency or a couple agencies at a time. But
that's a great idea. What else? Again, maybe think about your constituency, folks you work with, the things that are challenging for them in this coming year, and things that would be helpful for this group to think about and tackle. One of the things I'll throw out, I guess, Mark, I looked at you and sparked this thought. One of the things that came up a lot in those interviews was thinking about how does this council engage cities? Even like last night in St. George, talking about how water conservancy districts really don't have any enforcement power, but cities, municipalities can require things. And so the example I've heard at Central Utah Water used a few times is about there's still cities that require X amount of green grass and grass parking strips and things like that. So if you have those ideas about changing those things, is your best place to go to the city, to the municipality. So that's kind of again, like I say, a comment that came in a bunch is how our watershed council is going to engage local government. So I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on that, or something that'd be helpful, or what are you thinking there, Kim?
So the councils that I'm familiar with do have elected officials that serve on them, and so I think that's the key, is getting elected officials involved. And so it would be interesting to know the makeup of most of the councils, and I know we have that somewhere, DEQ, on many of the existing ones, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. But that's a really good point. We do need to engage everyone that are all of the decision makers and folks that could influence change.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts on how to do that? You think, is it tapping, of course, to those existing councils that DEQ has been working with and Water Quality has been working with, but any other thoughts on how to do that?
If I could just say a little bit, there's a lot of energy around water in general. I think one of the things we could do at our next meeting might be actually a little review of whatever actually gets passed in the legislature, and how it affects maybe what we're doing, because I think there will be a lot of stuff that's talked about for sure. I don't know what all will pass. One thing we could try to do, so the League of Cities and Towns, and if you're familiar with what's called Prep 60, which is the 4 major water districts, are working together on what's called the H2O Collective to try to help contact policymakers. Maybe we could try to coordinate with H2O Collective to figure out how to get a message out about this, because cities are going to be honestly a little bit inundated with ideas on how to be better water stewards and things, and so I don't want to overwhelm them, and so just trying to figure out how do we work within, again, these existing groups maybe.
Gotcha. And just so everybody knows, I did go meet with Prep 60 as one of the groups I met with, and that was super helpful. Good group. Okay, very good. H2O Collective, we got that. Corey, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was just thinking there are some statewide watershed improvement initiatives. There's the sage grouse work, other things like that. It seems like a lot of those things might be more of our focus to try to better understand, to better support, and to coordinate with. And a lot of these other things are things that are going to be tackled on the local level. We've got a lot of just great things already on the ground with NRCS and with the watershed groups under Kim, with the TMDLs and the non-point source work, and we just really need to support that, not duplicate anything that's already working.
Yeah.
Let's not waste our time and effort with those things, but just support that and help move those things forward, and then and see kind of the statewide things that might be more appropriate for this level.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Any other thoughts or ideas, or Marcel?
Just two things, if I could. Just back to your city question. With the land and water planning integration effort and the workshops that are starting off, if there's an opportunity, I mean, many of these cities and counties may know those local watershed groups that are working, but if you've already got the information and that could be shared with the consultant who is doing those workshops, maybe that can help them with their stakeholder lists. And so anyway, there might be a good connection there. And then the other thing was just back to the other ideas, and maybe this is later in the year, but I do think, finding out what's happening cutting edge in terms of watershed management and hearing from some experts out there, I think would be really fantastic, and then being able to get that information out.
That sounds great. So I've kind of had that thought, if you had something like that might be helpful, having a short presentation at each meeting, where if there's somebody if you learn about something that's cutting edge and maybe the rest of the group doesn't know, having that person come speak, and that might be helpful to have that just kind of be part of each one, kind of like Candice talked about being a learning organization. I like that idea of always trying to find something that's new and maybe we haven't thought about. Okay. Thanks for everybody's patience. We're almost there. Any other thoughts or ideas or things you would like to have in an upcoming agenda or tackle?
That was funny. I was just about to unmute myself on the screen. That's how inundated that habit is. So one other thought, just so April, hopefully we will have hit our snowpack peak on April 1st. Might be interesting for this group to have a water supply update, if that's great. Something that might be interesting. So kind of know what's happening then. And the NRC, I'll offer up the NRCS service. They're great at the snow survey. And they do a lot of them.
Excellent. Yeah, great idea. All right. Any of you that have been sitting in the back, do you guys have any thoughts you want to add or comments, ideas? No? Wendy, you've got tons of experience. Anything you want to add? Warren, if you're still with us, do you have anything you want to add? Do we maybe lose him now?
Let's see. I don't think I'm still on the internet. I think I'm just on phone. So I'll go over some things with Peter on the rules of operation that I think would help. But I'm very encouraged by what I hear, and I'm glad to see this group taking this idea and this tool and this opportunity and making something of it. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Peter.
I just got to say, I also really like what I'm hearing today This did start with the idea of those local councils, and Warren talked about Colorado. At the same time, what got me excited about this group right here, as I was going through starting the initial drafts, was in the initial meetings with Todd and Dave Ure, who's not with us today. He would have something to add from the back, but was the opportunity where we had so many people from agencies in there, and I know several of you in here too were there. And what we were having is a lot of program people come up and say, hey, this is what we're doing with water. This is what we're doing in watersheds. And I learned so much in those meetings. I think everyone was learning stuff. And a lot of these folks are people that they're program people. They're doing this stuff day in, day out. Now, it's not like there was zero communication in there, but there wasn't enough. And too many overlapping, too many disjointings. And there has been a lot of progress made even since then. But again, with the way this group is talking, and to see again already some of the communications and opportunities that are being observed, just warms my heart. But it really does. It's great to see. I just have to put my 2 bits there. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
So one more thing, Dan.
Yes,
if you
sir.
Don't mind. I was kind of hesitant to bring it up, but there's things that come up every year as far as watershed issues. One of them is harmful algal blooms that happen at every reservoir along every river, and so it'd be good to understand how to deal with those a little more practically. Another one is forest health and forest fire issues and mitigation, and it's just a huge concern of everybody that has water in the watershed or has a watershed.
Yeah.
So just a couple of things that at some point it would be nice to understand and grasp a little bit.
So Scott, that's kind of why earlier today I mentioned the shared stewardship. I almost wonder, it seems like that's we talked about concurrent efforts going on. That one's huge for that, right?
Yes.
So that might be an idea, is that we have some of the folks that are launching all that and doing tons of work. Maybe that'd be a good presenter to come talk. But okay, and that's also another good example, right? So hopefully, Candice, in April, we're able to have this fantastic snow report that everybody's excited about. But if it from those charts you showed, if it trails off, that might be. Sorry, I'm just saying that we may have to alter our agenda and get talking about some of those things. So. No, I'm not superstitious. I don't believe in that stuff. All right. Well, okay. This is great. Thanks, everybody, for all your work on this. Yep, Warren?
Yeah. And just to, let's see, I'm not counsel for this, but maybe Peter is. The question I have is, are the council members satisfied with you managing the agenda again for purposes of the Open and Public Meetings Act for the next meeting? And should they delegate that to you so that it's clear that you have that authority from the council?
That's a good question. One of the things I was just going to do. Yes, that's right. Until we have a chair, I think you're kind of stuck with me helping you a little bit. But we have a form in front of each one of you and your stack of papers there of a meeting comment form. Just we'd like your feedback about how we can make these valuable for you. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking a minute and just jotting down a couple of your thoughts on that. Let's see, what is it?
I think I should do that.
Oh.
It does say the division.
Yeah, that's my point. Is that
Oh, right.
Division takes care of the agenda.
Sure. Well, and we're all working together on that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you're ready at the next meeting to elect officers. That would be helpful as we move forward in putting agenda items together and working with the chair to do that.
Right. Yep. So hopefully, that'll be one of our agenda items, is to get the chair at the next meeting, and then we'll be off and running. But I guess to maybe address Warren's comment as well, but if you wouldn't mind putting your thoughts down on that meeting evaluation form, and then if that's one of the things we can do better at is agenda and that kind of stuff, we can, if you give us your ideas there, that would help. So, Okay.
Dan, I have one more question. Thanks
Okay.
to Mark. Thanks to Mark and Peter. Am I going to have to live with the moniker of Methuselah from now on?
It's Peter's fault.
This is a public meeting, so yeah, probably.
A recorded public meeting. Yeah, thanks.
Is that all, Warren?
That's more than enough, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's good. Okay, Candice, you want to take us home? Any closing thoughts or?
I know it's been a long meeting, and just really grateful for all of you for your participation, your willingness to serve on this council. And, it will be a work in progress, and we have a long ways to go, but I think it is worth the effort that it'll take, and I appreciate your participation. And thanks to everyone who's helped put this together so far, and Todd and Rachel and Shannon and my staff that's worked on it, and Wendy and then all the group. So thank you. And let's get out of here.
Okay, thank you.